All right, so it's winter time, 2022, and since it's kind of cold out here and I didn't feel like working in the garage today, I thought I would go through and recap some stuff that I didn't do a video on last winter. In this case, how we recovered the dash. When we first got this car, it was in a barn over 20 years. And it had some sun exposure, and the dash was heavily pitted. There was a lot of pieces that were split or completely missing. Some of the foam was completely gone. And so we looked at replacing that. And there's a couple things to keep in mind when you're looking at that. First of all, the replacement is about $430 at Moss. It's not a cheap replacement to replace just the plastic part. Now, the other thing about that is that's just the rubber. So if you have some rust underneath down here, some structural problems with it, you'll have some other repairs to make as well. And I'll show you some pictures of that and how we were able to restore that. In our case, we had a lot of rust down here on the bottom, and I had to rebuild some of that with Bondo and expanding foam, and then we covered it with vinyl. But the trick here is we did not replace the rubber pad. In case we covered the whole thing with vinyl. We got that at Joann's. It's about somewhere between $10 and $20 per yard when you buy that. Depends on what coupon they have, but you can get it pretty cheap. You can see it's got a nice texture to it. It's a good vinyl. It's not some cheap stuff. I'm going to show you how to stretch that out and how we able to stretch raw vinyl right over the top of the bad dash cover, and then we put this fine wood kit by B&I. I'll give you a link to that product. It came out really well. Now, the only thing about this wood kit that we had to make some adjustments is because we added the vinyl onto here, it changed the dimensions a little bit. So we had to trim it a little bit. I did that with a sander just to reduce the outside edge of that, and it didn't fray it up or nothing. It came out really well. Basically, this video today is going to be a lot of pictures, and I'm going to orate some of those pictures from last year. I didn't do a video while I was doing it, but it came out pretty well. The first step is to take the dash out. Now, the thing about that is it's just a couple of bolts. It's really not that difficult. I'll show you here how easily this thing sits in there. You can see all the bolt points right along the metal part of the interior. See, some of them got beat up a little bit. And in our case, this bolt right here and this bolt right here, these were broken out by a previous owner working on something, couldn't get it off. I epoxied those new bolts in, got them in the right angle. And these are stainless steel, so they were not going to rust. I'm sure that's why they were both broken out before, is that they got rusty. The trick with these is this back piece is metal. And when you buy the rubber replacement piece, it goes over the top of this metal. So when you take your dash out, be sure to inspect this and make sure that you don't have any irreparable damage. You can see right here there was no rust, and it continues over. Here's a repair that I did with some inflated or some expanding foam and a piece of mesh that had some tape on it, and you just need to get it so that it will hold that vinyl. So you can't just buy and hope to get the whole thing and just plug it in there. You have to buy the rubber cap, and you have to try to recover this metal piece. That's really the trick, is to come away with something that works well. So there's a couple of clips down here on the bottom that come off real easy. So here's one for the center, one over there underneath the dash. And then the other bolts are all these that you see across the top, and they set right in place. All right, so first step in here is to identify where all the damage is. Pull away the flaps of vinyl and reveal the rust. You need to remove all that rust because it's just going to fester the more that you put in there. And here you see I'm pulling away the rust on the bottom edge. This vinyl is all cracked. So what I did was I took a razor and cut a nice clean cut along this bottom edge here, and got rid of all this rust, pulled off all this on the top up here, and treated all that rust. Once I treated the rust so that it wouldn't get any worse, I sprayed it with a rust preventing, or it's a special kind of paint. It's not just Rust-Oleum, but it's agricultural grade. It's spray paint for killing rust, basically, and that makes it so that it's a nice surface, so that you can add to this. So you're not adding to any kind of old paint. You have good, fresh material to work with. Here you can see this bottom piece here has been rusted away, and then here I've taken that piece and reinforced it with a little piece of adhesive mesh. This one side of that mesh is adhesive. You can stick it to that fresh paint and bend it into whatever shape you need. Once you got that in there, you're going to go through and find all the holes and voids, and throw some great stuff in there, some expanding foam. I like using this great stuff. It's the trigger activated stuff. Make sure you use gloves when you're using that, because that stuff will get to the hair on your skin and this be a real pain in the butt. So you fill the holes with the great stuff, and the great stuff is kind of porous, so you're going to fill that with the Bondo. And here you can see this is where that mesh was, and the Bondo goes over the top of that, and then the vinyl will go over the top of that. So it's going to hide a multitude of sins. But basically, you're just rebuilding anything that is not smooth, so that when the vinyl goes over it, it'll smooth it out really nice. So here's the top, shows where all the voids were, and then this is the Bondo. It's a rough coat of Bondo. With Bondo, you put more on and let it dry, and it will shrink down a little bit. You just don't want to make another void and have to put multiple coats on. This is just a light coat, so you can fill all those voids. Here's a dent right in here. You see I probably put some Bondo in there as well. But the idea here again is just to make it smooth, so when the vinyl goes over the top of it, it'll cover it up really nice. Here's after all the Bondo's been applied, you want to sand it. I just used an 80 grit. Doesn't have to be really well sanded, it just has to be smooth. Don't over sand it. You can sand a groove right down into that Bondo and you'll end up having to put it in again. So just make it nice and smooth. Use the sanding block so that you don't push in with your finger and make a hole from sanding. And here I have spray painted over the top of the Bondo and the expanding foam. This gives the glue for the vinyl a really good surface to stick to, instead of something porous that will make the glue bumpy. It's just a light coat of Rust-Oleum on here, over the top of the vinyl and over the top of the Bondo and the patches, and it gives a nice slick, smooth surface so that you can glue that vinyl down onto it. So the first step with laying the vinyl is you have to kind of convert 2D to 3D. So the first step you have to do is plan it out. In this case, you can see we've cut out a template of the top surface, so we can get an idea of how deep that's going to be standing up and how much of the material that's going to get in there. Planning is everything. If you start halfway through this and realize that I didn't have enough here, or I had too much there, or whatever, you're going to wish that you had planned it all out. And so lay it all out, get an idea of what you got. This is about $20 worth of vinyl. It's really not that expensive, so if you can make a mistake, you can just start over again. But again, you're taking a 2D flat surface and you're going to extrude it into something that is an oddball 3D shape. So you have to kind of, I use butcher paper. You can use parchment, whatever. You can use some string. Kind of figure out what, how far each of these is going to go up and down, so that you can trace that or track that back and figure out where you need to start, because you don't want to run out halfway through. So we started in the middle. The idea being that even when you have it all planned out, once you start stretching things, things will start to stretch in odd weird positions. And if you start in the middle, the worst case scenario, it will only be multiplied half the distance. Whereas if you start on one end, you make a mistake on one end, and it starts going in the wrong direction, you're going to translate that error all the way through to the very end. So here we started in the middle. We find a good flat section. The trick with the contact cement is, which we use for connecting the vinyl. With the contact cement, you want it to be applied in on both surfaces separately, and then let it dry completely. And then once it's dry, you want to mate those two surfaces back together and roll them or push them with the back of a screwdriver, so that they smash together nice. And the idea behind it is contact cement. Once it comes in contact with itself, it becomes sticky again, and that makes it adhere. It's a really great material. It's easy to play with, and you can see in this case, this is where we started in the middle here, and everything else kind of flows from here. When you progress from one section to the next, work in little triangles. Here you can see I got a pen and a white pencil. Using the white pencil to draw lines in the surface that is black, and using the pen to draw the equal line for the mating surface on the back side of the vinyl. And basically you fold it over, you plan where you're gonna do your next little section, and do little triangles, and you can stretch them out from one section to the next. Paint both sides, let it set. It's a long drawn out process. You have to let that glue set until it dries. We have a little thing of acetone for cleaning these brushes, so that once you get one wet, you dry the other one, and you have two of them, and that way you don't have to worry about having the glue dry on the brush. But work in little triangles, draw lines, make them match up, and then paint within those lines with the glue. Let the glue dry, and then stretch it out over those little triangles and move from one section to the next. The hardest part of this whole project was this deep section right here, coming from the air conditioning to the gauges. This area right here was the deepest, longest stretch, and so you can see we had a triangle over on this side, triangle on that side, and then this section right here was done, and then all of that gets pushed down in here. Once you start moving along, you want to keep the planning going. You want to keep track of where you're going and how far you're going. In this case, the underside of the dash has all been done in here, and we're just planning what to do with the bottom side of the dash. You can see this fold right here. Eventually we cut that to make it easier, because all of this is waste in the middle here. It's not going to be used. But here's our heat gun. You can see this fold right here. It looks like, oh my gosh, there's a fold. Well, you know what? You throw a little heat on that, and that becomes so pliable, you can fold it right back out, and it doesn't become a problem. Here you can see the whole top of the dash is laid out. The really deep section in here is in these corners. They look like they're not done. What happened in these corners, because they were really a long stretch, is we pushed some glue up in there and let it dry, and I made some wooden plugs, and I clamped them into position so that they would dry overnight, and that went away really easy. So some of it's not going to be real easy, and some of it you have to use clamps, and some of it is you have to coax it with the heat gun, but it's very pliable. It's really easy to play with. Just take your time, let the glue dry completely, because if you start working with it when it's wet, it won't set and it will start to get squishy and move around. So you want each section to be completely set before you move on to the next one, because when you start stretching on it, you don't want the stuff that you've already got set to start moving with your new stretch. Then we got the wood dash kit. I want to show you right here. See this section right in here, how that's a little bit bigger, and back in here you can see underneath here how this is really thin. These sections, when we added the vinyl, they had to be trimmed, and so I trimmed them with a sander. And the idea behind the sander was if I used a razor, it would have been sharp chops, and so the sander, I was able to just go and whittle it down little bits at a time and recheck it before I got it. Now the B&I kit had really great instructions. It comes with these little markers that you put on the surface to clean off the surface before you remove the backing, and this got like a tape on the back. It's a self-adhesive on the back, but it's a really good adhesive, and you use these little markers and you put it on the mating surface, the vinyl surface that you're going to mate it up with, and then you follow those instructions and you lay it in place. But before you laid that in place, make sure that you have pre-tested laying it in place to make sure that the all the holes match up, everything is going to go where it's going to go. And if you have to make adjustments, I recommend that you use a sander from the backside rather than a razor blade or something, because it'll make it a nice smooth cut. And here you go, you see the whole thing's all laid out. I was showing you how, let me go back to the previous. See how these really thin spots up in here and here. See, this is not nearly as thin as it is now. See how much thinner that is? I had to reduce those dimensions just a little bit, and I did that with the sander, and it came out really good. Here's a little teaser for another video coming up. The speedometer on the 77 MGB has a plexiglass face. All the rest of the gauges are glass except for the speedometer, and I think it could be because there's a little odometer trip meter, the little hole right here. But we found a company in Virginia that makes a replacement bezel kit for this speedometer, and it has a glass face. So I'll do another video on that later on to show off that neat little thing once we get to putting the gauges back in. But that came out really nice. You can see all of the vinyl cuttings. When we cut the inside out, there was a cut line all along here, and all that's been covered by this this wood kit. So it makes it a whole lot easier. Here you're looking at like a $20 material cost, maybe $30 if you include the glue and some odds and ends. So that was like a $400 savings by doing it this way. And our idea was, hey, let's try it, and if it doesn't work, then we can spend the money. It's it's not a big deal. And one of the things that inspired us to even attempt this was another video. I'm going to put it in my comments down below. We saw a video of a gentleman that was putting leather upholstery over the top of a dash, and we had a lot of experience with vinyl, and it just said, hey, if we can do it with leather, we can do it with vinyl. So there's a lot of other different ways that you can cover these vinyl, these dashes with problems. They sell a kit that just goes over the top. I thought that was kind of hokey. They have these other kits where you can sand it all down and spray it with powder, which makes it kind of a felt dash. I thought that was kind of screwball too. So this was a pretty good solution, and if it didn't work, ultimately we would have bought the replacement kit, but ended up saving the money and spending that money on this nice wood dash kit. So that's how we did it. And you can see it's really easy to replace. The trick with the vinyl again is when you're working with the glue, do it in little triangles and wait for the glue to dry completely before you put the two pieces back together again. I highly recommend that you use a heat gun for this. It all came out really nice. And again, one of the things that really made it a lot easier is putting this wood kit in here, because that means we didn't have to make a flat vinyl surface on the inside here. Be able to cut that away just inside where you can't see where the wood is covering it. But there's a cut right there where the vinyl was cut, and then the wood covers that up, and it looks really nice. So, save about $400. The wood kit was an improvement, so I don't consider that a cost of the vinyl replacement. It would have been an improvement anyway. But it's really easy to do. If you have any questions or comments, throw them in the comments section. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Vinyl work is a lot easier than you think it is. Just take your time with it, stretch it, use a heat gun, go in little triangles, make sure that the glue is completely dry before you put the two pieces back together again.